Story 1. My wife is participating in a viral TikTok trend. She's taking it too far. Oh, that's so creepy. My wife, Anna, shouted. I know, right? One of my coworkers sent it to me, Lori said, her attention stuck to the screen. They locked eyes, malicious smirks inching across their faces. Wanna try it? Definitely, Lori replied as the sisters shifted their focus to me. I'm kinda scared to ask, but what are you trying exactly? Whenever those two got together, they were capable of some real mischief. And oftentimes, it came at my expense. You'll see, Anna said, handing me her phone. I furrowed my brows as I sank into the couch. I hesitantly glanced down at the screen, unsure if this was part of the ruse. A TikTok video was playing on repeat. A woman was on screen, her long, brown hair partially obscuring her features from view. A wide smile was plastered across her face. That alone was creepy, but the way she was standing, it was off-putting. The video cut on several occasions, and each time it did, the woman was in a different spot in the house. Hiding behind curtains, crouching under the table, standing on the stairs. All the while, that same manic grin never left her lips. Not even once. The man filming was getting audibly more freaked out with every encounter. I kept waiting for some sort of punchline. I thought that eventually the woman would break the facade and return to her normal self. But she never did. The video ended with a close-up of the woman's bulging eyes as she lunged at the camera, and a guttural shriek from the man filming. Once it was over, I hurriedly swiped off the video and breathed a sigh of relief. Phew. Okay, I see what you're. I froze. It was only then that I noticed it. Anna and Lori were gone. They must have walked away at some point during the video. My heart dropped into my stomach. I really didn't like this trend, but I had a feeling that I was about to witness it firsthand. Anna? Lori? Come on, you know I hate this kind of stuff, I shouted, tentatively entering the kitchen. My eyes immediately fell to a pair of feet sticking out from beneath the curtains. I pursed my lips, marching up to the window. I ripped the drapes aside to find Lori standing there, smiling up at me. Oh, I'm shaking. So scary, I huffed, crossing my arms. Lori held her pose for about 5 more seconds before she couldn't contain her giggles any longer. Haha, okay, you got me. I admit, that wasn't as funny as I thought it'd be, she grinned, covering her mouth. Believe me. I know. Let's go find your sister, Lori nodded, following behind me. Anna, I found Lori. Time to come out now. I received no response. Lori and I continued to scour my home, searching up and down for my wife. Once I reached the top step, I saw it. The door to our room was slightly ajar, leaving a thin, inviting sliver of darkness. I can't explain why, but something about it sent a shiver down my spine. It was as if Anna had wanted me to find her. The whole thing felt wrong. I took a deep breath, mustering all of my courage, and pushed open the door. I nearly screamed once I laid eyes on the scene that awaited me. Anna was standing in the middle of the room. The only light illuminating her features was that seeping in from behind me, and the muffled rays trickling in through the curtains. The middle of the room, where my wife was lurking, was drenched in darkness. Anna stood there, still as a statue, her jet-black hair partially obscuring her eyes. Even through the shadows, I could see a nauseatingly wide smile stuck to her lips. My heart jackhammered against my chest, and beads of sweat began to form atop my brow. For the first time in our 12 years of marriage, I was terrified of my wife. I flipped on the light switch, careful not to take my eyes off her. Anna, I found you. You can stop now. She completely ignored me. I only knew that she was still breathing by the slight rise and fall of her chest. The silence was deafening. Any luck finding her yet? Lori asked, snatching me from my stupor as she reached the top step. Yeah, I did, I replied, weakly pointing to Anna's motionless form. Lori marched right up to her like it was nothing. Okay, Anna, fun's over. You're about to give your hubby a heart attack. My wife didn't respond. Lori tried waving her hand in front of Anna's face, to no avail. She didn't so much as blink. All right, Anna, time to give it up. You're starting to freak everyone out, Lori said, clasping her sister by the shoulders and lightly shaking her. Anna slowly turned toward Lori, and their eyes locked. Lori gulped before taking a step back. Blood pounded in my ears. There was nothing behind those hazel irises. I didn't even recognize them anymore. Lori backed away, never breaking eye contact until she was standing directly beside me. Tim, let's go downstairs and regroup, okay? She murmured. The panic in her voice made my blood run cold. That works for me, I mumbled back. It felt as if we had to speak at a lower volume. Like talking above a whisper would cause Anna to break. We crept out of the room, closing the door as we went. We'll be downstairs, Anna. It would be nice of you to join us whenever you're ready to give up on this dim trend. Anna didn't acknowledge her. Once we made it downstairs, I took a deep breath. Lori sat on the couch, leaning forward and clutching her phone with a vice grip. What should we do, Tim? This was just supposed to be some stupid gag. Anna's always taken these things a bit too seriously, but this, I've never seen anything like it. She's really scaring me, I don't know. I've never seen her like this before either. Do you think we might be overreacting? I mean, maybe she really is just taking this a bit too far. Even I didn't believe that, but it was the only plausible explanation I could come up with. Yeah, that has to be it. Surely she'll snap out of it at some point. Right? She has to. It wouldn't. The words caught in my throat. I caught Anna peeking around the corner, half of her face hidden from view. Her expression was the exact same as it had been when we'd left her upstairs. Lori traced my gaze until she realized who I was looking at. She instinctively backed away upon making eye contact with her sister. Tim? How long has she been standing there? Lori squeaked, shrinking into the sofa. I have no idea. We didn't even hear her walk down the stairs. The three of us sat there in silence. The tension was so thick that even a knife wouldn't cut through it. I could feel myself beginning to shake. Tim, I really hate to do this to you, Lori began, turning towards me, but I can't take this anymore. It's too much. I'm going home. Call me if there's anything I can do. And please, try to get Anna some help. If you can, she uttered, grabbing her purse. I could feel the color drain from my face. Lori, please, don't leave me alone with her. I don't know how to handle this. I'm sorry. I feel bad. Believe me, I do. But it's getting late, and my kids have school tomorrow. I shouldn't have even stayed for this long. I nodded, my bottom lip beginning to quiver. All I could muster was a week. Okay, Lori beelined for the door, straight past her immobile sister. Anna didn't even twitch. Instead, she opted to remain watching me the entire time. Once the door slammed shut, the pit in my stomach grew even deeper. I was at a loss for words. My wife and I stood there in a sickening staring match, neither of us blinking. The smile on her face never wavered. In fact, once that door shut, I could have sworn that I saw it stretch just a little bit wider. I don't know if it was the stress or the fear or Lori's sudden betrayal, but something in me snapped. This was silly. Anna was obviously still running with that stupid TikTok challenge, and I was feeding into it hook, line, and sinker. I started to get angry. "All right, Anna, stand there for as long as you want. I don't care. When you're ready to talk about this like adults, I'll be finishing up some work on my laptop." She didn't respond. My wife just kept staring at me with that same Cheshire grin plastered to her lips. Fine by me. I was done buying into whatever she was playing at. I sank down into my armchair and picked up my laptop, careful to keep Anna in my peripheral vision. Something deep down told me that I needed to keep her in my line of sight. I opened my laptop, trying to distract myself from Anna's strange behavior by doing some research for an article I was writing. But I just couldn't seem to get it together. It's almost impossible to focus on a task when you can feel someone looking at you. I sighed. 30 minutes later, and I hadn't digested a single word of anything I'd read. This was going nowhere. I was preparing to try to communicate with my stock-still wife again when I heard it. Something near the doorway skittered across the floor. I slowly glanced up to where Anna had been standing for nearly an hour. She was gone. I strained my ears, listening for anything that might clue me in as to where she went. The only sounds that I heard were my own labored breathing and the rapid pounding of my heart. My fingers quivered. I didn't know if I had the strength to do it, but I had to know. With trembling hands, I closed the lid on my laptop just enough to see over it. I nearly screamed as it clattered to the floor. I scrambled out of my seat and backed up until I was pressed against the wall. Anna was on all fours, frozen mid-stride. She smiled up at me, again staying still as a statue after I'd noticed her. Something instantly caught my attention. Her eyes. I'd never seen anything like them before. They were hungry, predatory, and I was their target. I failed to calm myself down as I slunk around the perimeter of the living room, careful not to break eye contact. Once I reached the stairs, I bolted up them, taking 3 at a time, until I reached the top landing. I burst into our room, slammed the door shut, and made sure that it was locked. I was safe. Or so I thought. What the hell is going on? This is insane, I said out loud, patting my pockets to try and find my phone. A sickening realization crashed over me like a tidal wave. I'd left it on the coffee table when I was working on my laptop. We didn't have a landline either. I was trapped. I began to hyperventilate and pace around the room. What was I supposed to do? My car keys were in the bowl downstairs, so even if I was able to climb out of the window, I'd have to go back inside to get them. Running to a neighbor's house was out of the question. We lived on a secluded road, and we didn't even know the nearest people to us. In the end, I concluded that I had no other option but to try to sleep it off and hope that my wife was back to normal in the morning. I slipped into a t-shirt and gym shorts before lying in my bed. I knew that I probably wasn't going to get a wink of sleep, but I had to give it a shot. It was the only thing I could do. I turned the lamp off, and the room was bathed in darkness, aside from the faint yellow glow trickling in from underneath the door. Right before I closed my eyes, I noticed something that ensured I was wide awake. I could barely make out someone's feet blocking the light. I shuddered. How long had she been standing there? I didn't want to know the answer. I suddenly heard the doorknob begin to jiggle. My heart raced like a piston, and I could feel all the blood rush from my face. How could I have forgotten? I keep a spare key stashed on top of the door frame for emergencies. This was it. I was cornered. The door slowly creaked open. I could see the glimmer of Anna's stark white teeth through the opening. Her eyes were bloodshot, and rightfully so. I hadn't seen her blink once. I couldn't move a muscle. I was paralyzed with fear, waiting for my wife to scamper across the floor and do God knows what to me. But she never did. I don't know how long we spent staring at each other. It must have been hours. In that entire time, her mouth didn't so much as twitch. That twisted smile remained stuck to her lips like she was a figure in a painting. I don't know how, but eventually, I must have nodded off. Because when I opened my eyes again, Anna was gone. The house was pitch black, save for the moonlight shining through the downstairs windows. I could feel it. I could feel her, like a presence looming over me. Every synapse in my brain screamed at me to stay where I was, to wait it out and pray that nothing would happen. But I couldn't. I steeled my resolve, ready to fight if need be. I flipped onto my back, fully expecting to find my wife hovering over me with some sort of weapon in hand. But she wasn't there. My eyes grew wide. I hurriedly scanned the room. I didn't find her. This was my chance. I crept to the door, stifling my breathing as much as possible. The house was eerily silent. Once I made it to the stairs, I peered down them, squinting to see in the dark. The coast was clear. I tiptoed down each step, avoiding the creaky ones to the best of my ability. I felt nauseous. I could feel eyes on the back of my neck wherever I went, like I was a lamb being led to the slaughter in the supposed safety of my own home. Once I reached the bottom, I peeked around the corner to the living room. I immediately noticed something strange. The back door was hanging wide open, and the porch light was on. I drifted over to it like a moth to a flame, picking up my phone along the way. Nothing could have prepared me for what I saw when I looked outside. Anna was sitting on her haunches, crouched over something in the yard. Her long hair prevented me from seeing what she was doing. All of the sudden, as if on instinct, she snapped her head toward me with sickening speed. When our eyes locked, I felt like I was going to pass out. My wife was holding the carcass of a dead rat. She had devoured a large chunk of it, entrails, bones, and blood oozing from the rear end. But that wasn't the worst part. Somehow, even while ravaging a dead animal, Anna was still smiling. My fight or flight response kicked itself into overdrive. I slammed the back door shut and raced through the kitchen as fast as my legs would carry me, snatching my keys on the way. I shot out the door at lightning speed, not bothering to close it behind me. I leapt into the driver's seat of my Chevy, and I stepped on the gas. As my truck kicked up dust, I happened to glance in the rearview mirror. I released a horrified shriek at what I saw. Anna was standing under the garage light. She watched me leave, that wide, bloody smile still plastered across her face. I don't know where I'm going. I doubt the cops will be of any help. I don't think Anna has technically done anything illegal, so their hands would probably be tied. I just had to get out of that house. I've parked at a truck stop for now until I can get my thoughts together. Even though I've made my escape, I'm still downright horrified. But not for the reasons you might think. Story 2. My dying grandma made me something called a tomorrow quilt, and it's predicting my future. I finished it yesterday, she told me, her breath shallow, her voice weak. I wanted to finish it before things got worse. My grandma was dying. It wasn't unexpected. She was 91, and her health had been failing her for a year or so. We all knew it was a matter of time. Some of us hoped it'd come sooner rather than later, because she seemed to be in pain, especially in the last few weeks. Regardless of how bad she felt, my grandma still made time during the day to quilt. Quilting had been a large part of her life. Every family member had a quilt specially made for them. Except for me, that is. However, she had told me last year after her diagnosis that she was finally going to make me one. "I haven't been ignoring you, little duck," she said softly. "She's called me little duck since I was born. She's the only person I allow to call me that. I was waiting for the right time to start. Nana, you don't have to do that," I said. "Focus on getting better," she laughed. "There is no getting better at 91, Amber. I've lived a good life. I've been blessed with a loving family. I couldn't have asked for more. I owe you a quilt, and it'll be unlike any I've ever made before. I promise I'll get it to you before the good Lord calls me home." We hugged, and I started crying. Even in her weakened state, she soothed me. The woman only knew grace. That was about a year ago. Now, with her body frail and her hands trembling, she handed me the quilt. My eyes got weepy, and I held her as tight as I could without hurting her. She whispered into my ear that she loved me and hoped I liked the blanket. I nodded and tried to speak, but the words drowned in the tears that came falling. I held her until my body ached. Her love radiated through me. "Promise me," she said between breaths, "that you'll keep it close." "I will," I finally choked out. She smiled. "Then I can rest easy." 2 days later, the Lord called her home. The following week was a whirlwind. I helped my mom plan a funeral, set up a wake, and go through Grandma's things. It was the most challenging week of my life. My mom and I were a mess for most of the time. That said, when the rubber met the road and we needed to be ready for the rest of the family, we turned down our sadness and handled our business. I like to think Nana would have appreciated our fortitude in those moments. During the service and wake, we met many of Nana's friends, and they all had such lovely things to say about her. I heard stories I'd never heard about her. It turns out she was a bit of a badass and a rebel in her younger days, not afraid to ruffle some feathers. The thought of Nana as a rogue thug made me smile. Even better than tales of her badassery, so many people showed us photos of the fantastic quilts my grandma had made for them over the years. The works were stunning. Most quilts you've probably seen follow a set pattern. Those can be amazing, but they aren't what my grandma made. Grandma did what's known as art quilts, that is. She didn't follow a specific pattern, but created little scenes in each quilt square. As you can imagine, each square of the quilt is a miniature painting made of cloth. It's basically a tapestry. When she finally handed me the quilt, she said it was the culmination of her life's work. She called it the Tomorrow Quilt, which was made specifically for me. I didn't doubt that, as the first panel on the quilt showed a picture of my birth. I recognized it because she was inspired by a photo my dad had taken in the delivery room. The following 2 panels in the top row were also recognizable from old photos. Me as a toddler eating a lemon and me in kindergarten, also eating a lemon. What can I say? I learned lessons the hard way. In the chaos of my grandma's passing, I didn't have much time to look closely at the quilt she had given me. I saw the first row of panels and they looked incredible. She must have finished those when she first got her diagnosis, because they looked as good as any previous quilt she had done before. As time wore on and she got sicker and more frail, each subsequent square was a little less crisp, a little less polished than they'd been before. The second row was more of me graduating from elementary school, playing soccer in middle school, my 16th birthday party. As I said, these panels weren't as sharp as the top row, but were still better than most people could ever imagine producing. The following 2 rows were as far apart in quality as the earth is to the sun. The third row was degraded, and the figures were more or less advanced stick figures, but you could still make out what they represented. One was me graduating high school. The next panel was me finishing college. The last one was me at my grandma's funeral. That one struck me as odd and macabre. Grandma wasn't known for her dark sense of humor or anything, so the panel stood out. Still, since this was a blanket of essential moments in my life, I thought my grandma dying would rank in there. Weirder than that, though, was the final row of pictures. There wasn't any. Instead, it was just 3 white squares with nothing on them. She had told me she finished the blanket, but I assumed she must have sensed the end was coming sooner than she thought. Not having the time to finish correctly, Nana decided to just go with blank squares. Rather have a finished blanket with a few missing squares than an unfinished one with nothing. I didn't mind. I still treasured the quilt. About a week after my grandma died, I had a really strange day. It started before the sun even rose. I dreamed my grandma was sitting in my apartment, watching me sleep. In the dream, she was humming some tune I'd never heard before. In my dream, I woke up and we shared a look. I asked what she was doing there, and she said, "We're in the negative spaces." I asked her to repeat herself, but she just disintegrated like Peter Parker in Infinity War. I woke up confused, but got ready for my day. Nothing went according to plan. I walked out to discover my driver's side tire had been slashed and was flat as a pancake. 15 minutes later, I was on the road with my spare and a grumpy attitude. Work was the usual humdrum, which meant it was dull and aggravating in equal measure, except I had a surprise meeting with my boss at the end of the day. They mentioned I had taken off a few days recently and were worried it was a pattern. I reminded them about my grandma, and they backed off in that Weasley or manager speak. But the message was clear: no more time to grieve. I left work and was supposed to meet a guy at a local coffee shop for a drink, but he bailed at the last minute, saying he got a bad vibe this morning or something like that. Okay, it's not like we spent about a week talking to each other every night. God forbid that take precedence over your bad morning grumblies. I just chalked it up to him having a girlfriend and getting cold feet about an affair. Made me feel better. When I got home, I found my door slightly open. I hadn't noticed it from the car or on the walk up the drive. I was too busy horribly singing a pop song I had just heard on the radio, but when I saw the open door, I froze. Did I leave it open this morning in my dash to get to work on time, or was someone inside? While I stood there, waiting for my brain to function correctly again, I saw a shadow move along my kitchen wall. I ran back to my car and locked the doors. I started my car, but I didn't drive away. I called the police and said someone was inside my house, but I stayed in my driveway to watch if they came out. The police said they'd send someone right over, and I should stay away and keep safe. I stayed in my car until I saw the blue and red lights swirling behind me 10 minutes later, but I never left my driveway. I also never saw anyone leave through my front door either. The cops came and spoke with me briefly before drawing their guns and walking into my house. 5 or so minutes later, they walked out, their pistols now holstered. No one is inside, the officer said. Nothing looked ransacked or anything. Nothing. Don't sound disappointed, he joked. Everything looks okay. No forced entry anywhere. We checked. What about the shadow I saw? Mind was probably playing tricks on you, his partner said, passing by us to get into the car. We see it all the time, the officer said. You get keyed up thinking someone is near you, and you start misinterpreting things. Happens. I swear I saw a shadow. Well, no one who owns the shadow is inside the house, he said with a shrug. If you need anything else or think they're back, give 911 a call. If you want, we can swing by a little later to do a double check. I told them I would appreciate that, and they went on their merry way. I walked up to the house with a trepidation I had never felt before. To feel unsafe entering your own place is an unsettling feeling. Your home is supposed to be your safe space. a place where you don't have to worry. But on the shitty day too, and all shitty days, I got to experience that too. The cops weren't lying. Nothing was out of place. All my windows were still closed and locked. It looked like how I left it in the morning. I took a seat at my bar and sighed. What the hell had I seen? I decided to do a once-over in every hidey hole I could think of inside and outside my home. Each time, I only found a plethora of spider eggs and nothing else. There were no hidden people. After that, I was confident that I was alone in the house. I felt my shoulders drop and some of the tension slide out of my body. When the adrenaline left my body, I suddenly felt exhausted. My body felt heavy. My arms hung like sides of beef hanging from a meat hook. I found myself making my way to my bed to crash down. As I did, I grabbed the quilt and pulled it over my body. That's when I noticed something that had been altered. One of the blank squares on the quilt was suddenly filled in with a picture. I nearly choked on the water I was drinking when I noticed it. I threw the blanket off me like it was cursed and watched it for a few minutes to ensure it didn't start moving. But as it remained on the floor where I threw it, I felt okay to touch it again. The square's drawing was crudder than the last finished row of artboarding on abstract, but if I squinted, I could make out something. It was almost a line drawing of a door slightly open in the jamb. On one side was a woman with her stick arm up to her face in shock. On the other side of the door was a tall figure taller than the door, even it had claws for hands and red eyes. It was the only splash of color in the square, and it burned through you. It was hard not to connect the stitching to the day's events. I wasn't Inspector Clouseau or anything, but this was pretty obvious. What wasn't obvious was who would do this. Who breaks into my apartment and stitches on my quilt. It didn't make any sense. I called my friend, Samantha, and laid it all out for her. Sam was the first person I met when I moved here 6 months ago, and we clicked instantly. She has become my closest friend and the only person I know in this city. Something nobody tells you when you're growing up is how hard it is to make friends as an adult. I was terrible even in my peak friend-making years. Sam made that whole process easy. She was the only person I could trust enough to be honest about what was going on. She wouldn't judge me. I told her I was scared and didn't know what I was going to do. She offered to come by and stay over if I wanted to. I said yes 1,000 times and said I'd order us dinner. An hour later, she arrived just as the pizza man approached the door. I told her everything that was going on and showed her the quilt. She thought maybe something had attached itself to the quilt. She suggested I put it away somewhere and forget about it for a while. If I left it out, it was like I was inviting whatever to hang around. It made sense in a very, why not, sense. I was going to put it in my closet, but Sam said that might not be good enough. A wine-induced Google search later, we saw someone say something about putting demonic things in freezers to ward off spirits. It sounded like nonsense to me, but at the same time, I was out of rational ideas. I folded my new quilt, cleared space in my tiny freezer, and placed it next to a box of frozen French bread pizzas. It was ridiculous, and after we closed the freezer, we laughed, but it felt necessary. A hurdle my mind had to clear before I could feel a little normal again. It worked on some level. We returned to the pizza and a movie, and I forgot about the whole thing. For a while. Sam decided to stay. The wine had gotten on top of her, so I set up the couch. At around midnight, we said goodnight and fell asleep. I thought I might have trouble falling asleep, all things considered, but I drifted off to sleep without incident. Or so I thought. A few hours later, I heard the door to my room open. It woke me from another vivid dream, but as soon as my eyes fluttered open, I forgot every detail. I rolled over and saw Sam walking in. She looked wide awake. "What time is it?" I asked, still wiping away cobwebs. "Dude, the freezer door is open." That woke me up. I sat up and flipped on my side lamp. "What? The freezer door is open?" I didn't open it. I got out of bed and made my way to the bedroom door. I peered out and saw the faded orange light from my freezer. "You didn't close the door?" "I wasn't setting foot in there until I got you, and even then." She trailed off. "Is the quilt still in there?" "I didn't see." "I didn't want to see," she said quickly. When Sam was scared, she started to sound like she was coked up. "We should leave and go to my place." I'm sober. Seeing the freezer door open shoved me back in that direction with a quickness. "Let me go see," I said, opening my nightstand drawer and removing a knife. Sam looked at me quizzically. "That's a bread knife." "Shut up. It looks scary. Why not get a butcher knife?" "Is this a conversation you want to have at the moment?" She backed off. I opened my door wider and stepped out into the living room. Sam followed behind me like a baby duck following its mother. She held the back of my sleep shirt so tightly it pulled the collar tight along my throat. I tapped her hand and she released, letting me breathe normally again. Sure enough, the freezer door was open. But that's not what stopped me in my tracks. The quilt was gone. I lowered the knife to my side. "Gather up all your stuff, and let's get out of here," I said, my voice flat. "What's going on?" "I think something is here, but I don't know what." "What? Where?" "I dunno," I said. "It's a feeling, but it's strong. Should we call the police?" "I don't think it's anything they can handle." "Fuck, dude," Sam said, gathering her things. "What's going on? Did you spit on a grave or something?" "I dunno," I said, "but we should go." "I'm ready," she said. "You lead the way." I stepped out of my room when I heard the office door down the hall unlatch. It slowly swung open. We froze, and I felt my hand grip the knife handle so hard that I was afraid I'd break it. We waited for some guy to come walking out of the room with a crazed look in his eyes and a weapon in his hand, but that wasn't the case. Instead, someone had draped the quilt over their body and walked out into the hallway. It looked like a child's cheap ghost costume came to life. Only there was something off about it. I didn't see it at first until I heard Sam gasp. "They don't have legs," she said, pointing her shaking finger. That was it. The quilt wasn't draped over some guy's head. It was draped over something's head. The blanket fell to the floor as soon as Sam spoke those words into the world. As soon as it hit, all the lights in my house came on at once. The sudden reemergence of bright lights was temporarily blinding, and I raised my hand to cover my eyes. As I did, I saw the outline of a creature run back into my office and slam the door. That's when I just yelled out, "Let's get the hell out of here." Sam and I made a mad dash for the front door. We both were screaming, so I didn't hear if anything was following us, but I didn't care at that point. I was moving so fast that Usain Bolt would ask me to slow it down a bit. We climbed into my car, and I fired up the engine. Seconds later, we rocketed down the street and out of my neighborhood. We were buzzing the rest of the night. Sleep wasn't going to happen, so we went to an all-night donut shop and picked a corner booth to lay low. We both were at a loss at what we had just experienced. The cloud's silver lining was that I wasn't crazy. I had seen a shadow. The rain in the cloud, though, was almost too horrible to speak out loud. Either my grandma had been a demon or knew a demon, maybe. If not demonic, perhaps something worse? I shuddered to even imagine what that might be. Somehow, it was connected to my quilt. We threw a bunch of different ideas at the wall, but nothing stuck. We both called into work and decided to head back to my place. We waited until the sun was well in the sky, believing the rays would keep whatever at bay. It was nonsense, but what is faith if not belief in nonsense? While we were eager to get answers, we had a hard time getting going. We finally ran out of excuses and decided to head back over. I wanted to grab a crucifix, but we didn't have one. Thankfully, a nearby truck stop yielded one, and I put it in my front pocket like a sheriff holstering his weapon. The house was silent when we arrived. I walked in first, the cross held out in front of me, like we were some sort of Van Helsing SWAT team breaching a vampire's lair. But to our surprise, nothing was waiting on the other side of the door. Sam and I went through the house, inspecting it as we went along. Again, there was nothing out of place. We turned the corner where the quilt had been dropped. It was still there, beckoning me to check it out. Beyond it lay the still closed door of the office where the figure had retreated. I wanted to check the office, but needed to give the quilt a once-over first. Last time something weird happened, one of the blank squares transformed. I wondered if it happened again. Well, at least the ghost keeps it tidy in here, Sam said, trying to lighten the mood. Maybe I'll hire them to clean up once a month if they're not, trying to kill me, I said, inching toward the quilt. Maybe you shouldn't touch that, Sam said. In case, I dunno, it's cursed. I already feel cursed. What's this going at? I picked up the quilt and examined the two remaining blank squares. One of them was now filled in. I showed Sam, who looked confused. Is that a sheep? It was. Or kind of was. It was stitched like a 5-year-old drew it in kindergarten, but you could make it out. However, this sheep had red eyes like the guy in the other panel. 2 stick women were standing next to this thing. Is that you and I asked. Why am I standing next to the sheep? Sam asked, confirming my suspicions. I was the one who ran away first. Nana, I said out loud. Are you here? Not surprisingly, one responded. I'm going to go into the office, I said. You sure? No, I said, but I'm going to go anyway. I walked down the hall with the cross in front of me. My hands shook, but I kept moving. I stopped in front of the door, sighed, and twisted the handle open. It creaked as it opened wide to reveal my office. What the hell? I said, dropping the cross. The room was immaculate except for a piece of paper on the floor. There was a handwritten note scrawled across the page in shaky handwriting. It simply read, "We hide in the negative spaces." It was what my grandma had said in my dream. Below it was the drawing of a small duck. Sam came in and saw the note. What does that mean? I think the ghost is my grandma, I said. She said that to me in my dream the other night. What does it mean? I dunno, I said. I thought maybe that it was a hopeful message, like I'm never gone. But I am just out of sight, but now I don't know. Why is there a picture of a duck? Sam asked. I ignored her. You think it's a warning? Why would your grandma warn you? Maybe there's something I'm missing? I didn't know. The picture in the quilt shows the creature dressed as a sheep, a wolf in sheep's clothing. Have you pissed anyone off lately? I've been too sad to be angry. Maybe it's about an ex? Or maybe Grandma wasn't as nice as you thought. That stopped me. Everything I knew and heard about Grandma was that she was a wonderful woman, but that doesn't mean it's the whole story of her life. I heard tales of her badassery at the wake. Maybe part of that was devil worship. You always hear about people who die, and their families discover they were secret gamblers or had a franchise family in another town. Could Grandma have been one of those people? No, no way. Why would she take it out on me? How would she write a note from beyond the grave? We're all just flinging shit at the wall at this point. Sam wasn't wrong, but something in my gut told me I was onto something. I didn't understand how Grandma wrote notes or altered quilts, but I knew it was her. She was trying to tell me something, but I wasn't sure what. As I stood there pondering, a loud thump came from my bedroom. Sam and I turned around and glanced down the hallway. Another thump. This one was so violent a photo fell off a nearby wall. "What's that?" Sam asked, fear creeping into her voice. "It doesn't sound happy." Another thump, louder and angrier than before. I took a step toward it, but Sam stopped me. "What are you doing?" "We can't be afraid," I said. "The hell we can't," she fired back. "I gotta see what it is." "I can't get rid of it if I don't know what it is. You can move," she said, "or, hell, stay with me for now. You don't need to mess with it." I took another step down my hall, and Sam grabbed my shoulder. "Hey, I'm serious here. I know. But this thing isn't going to go away if I don't do something." "Ugh, you're so stubborn," she said. "I'll go with you." I wasn't arguing. I didn't know what was stomping around in my room, but I was glad to have a wingman. We made our way down the hall in the opposite direction, watching my bedroom door like it was the series finale of my favorite show. If anything came out, we'd run. We didn't discuss this, I just knew. We were about halfway there when the door to my bedroom unlatched and creaked open. We froze but didn't run. There was another thump against the wall, and another picture fell. This was one of Sam and me drinking Calidus at a block party right before the pandemic. It was shattered to pieces now. "Sa Mamonita," a deep, low-toned, rolling voice said. It seemed to be coming from my bedroom. Sam and I looked at each other. Fear was splashed across her face. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She took a step back, unsure of what to do. "Why are you here?" "Saman-Thatha." "What the hell?" Sam said, her voice finally breaking through. "What the hell is that? Why does it know my name?" My bedroom door slammed shut, opened quickly and slammed shut again. We both yelped and retreated into the office. I closed the door and looked at Sam. She was panicking. Hell, I was panicking, but I was trying to hold things together. We get a call, someone or something," she said. "Who? What would we even look up to solve this?" I asked. "I don't know any priests, and the Ghostbusters aren't real. Is this your grandma?" "I don't think so." "Then how did it know my name?" There was a knock on the door. We didn't say anything, but the voice in the hallway did. "Samantha, what are you hiding?" I've got to." There was a boom from outside my window, and all the power blinked out. I looked over at Sam. She was gone. I frantically searched around the office, but didn't see a trace of her. Whatever had been calling for her had somehow taken her. I opened the office door and stared out into the hallway. There was nothing there, but the door to my bedroom was opened. It had been closed. That's when I heard Sam yelling from inside my room. She was freaking out and screaming for my help. I took off in a sprint, but the power turned off as I did. I slowed my pace but was caught totally off guard when something jumped on me from the left side and sent me crashing to the floor. It took a second for me to realize it was the quilt. I tried kicking it off, but it was holding me down, keeping me totally covered. I tried to scream, but found as soon as I opened my mouth, fabric rushed in to dampen the scream. I heard my bedroom door slam shut. Sam was screaming for help, and I couldn't move. I tried punching the quilt off me, but it felt like someone was lying on top, pressing it down. I kicked and punched as best as I could, but nothing would budge. Then the house got completely silent. No more thumping. No more screaming. No more anything. It was like someone had muted my life. The quilt went slack. I kicked it off and rolled out from under it. I stood and ripped open my bedroom door. It was empty. Sam was nowhere to be seen. I felt tears stinging my eyes and then rolling down my cheeks. I started ransacking my room, trying to find any evidence of where she might have gone. My heart was beating so hard and fast that local DJs could sample it for an amazing drum and bass track. I stopped and stared at my messed up room. Sam was gone. No, 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 I said, my mind reeling. I brought her into this. This is my fault. Then I heard her yell for help. It was coming back from the office. I ran around my bed, ripped open the door, and was ready to sprint down the hall, but stopped dead in my tracks. The quilt had been laid out before me. The last square had been filled in. It was another crude stick drawing, but what it showed was clear. It was me, lying on the ground outside the office door with X's on my eyes. Sam was on the other side of the office door, but she had those red, glowing eyes. And she was smiling. I glanced at the other 3 panels. Something in my house. Something lying to me. Something killing me. It clicked, and I felt a sickness rising in my throat. I realized at that moment 3 things. 1, my grandma was here. 2, there was also a malevolent force in my house. And 3, I wasn't sure I had ever actually gotten a hold of Sam. I felt my phone in my pocket, pulled it out, and dialed her number. 3 rings later, I heard her chipper voice on the other end. Hey, what's going on? Are you at work? Yes. Why? I felt like I was going to throw up. Did you come over the other night? Ugh, no, weirdo. I was out of town until this morning. Remember? I had to do that stupid work trip because Greg thought it would be great for team building. I hate Greg. He sucks, she said before adding, why? The door to the office squeaked open. I heard Sam ask why again, but my attention shifted to the widening door. Ugh, you okay? You sound off. What's my favorite flavor of soda? I asked, looking for confirmation. You don't drink soda, Sam said. Are you sick or something? I'm not. Down the hall, I saw Sam's head peek around the office door. It was as clear, but it couldn't be because I was talking to her on the phone. I'm not. You need help? If you do, say something about a hair appointment. The Sam at the end of the hallway smiled and tried to wave me over. I didn't move. Even if I wanted to, my legs were out to lunch. Come look at what I found in the office. I think it's from your grandma. What's my favorite flavor of soda? I yelled down the hallway. Phone Samantha was confused as all hell. She started rambling about something, but my attention was totally on the hallway Sam in front of me. Dr. Pepper, hallway Sam said. Is now the time to play 1,000 questions? I need a haircut, I whispered into the phone, my voice quivering. Right now, the lights in the house flickered again and shut off. Hallwaysam's eyes started glowing red. I'm on my way, Phone Sam said and hung up. You're gonna want to see this, Hallway Sam said, her voice flat. The lights came back on, and I watched as Hallway Sam stepped out of the office and into the hallway. She stood with a demented smile twisted onto her face. The lights flickered off again. It's about your grandma, Hallway Sam said, her voice deepening, and it's really horrifying what sounded like what skin slapping against the ground filled the hallway. I watched as those glowing red eyes grew 2 feet higher than where they had been. The air was filled with a horrid stink that made me gag. We're in the negative spaces, it said before letting out an ear-splitting scream and charging after me. I let out my own blood-curdling scream and tried to run, but the fear glued me to the floor. I raised my hands to defend myself, but knew it wouldn't do much. The light started to flicker like a strobe, and in the brief snatches of light, I could see Sam morph fully into this demented, oozing creature charging at me. Each step altered her appearance, but those red glowing eyes stayed true the whole time. Right as it was about to slam into me, the quilt shot up from the ground like someone had yanked it up from the ceiling. The creature ran into the blanket, got tangled up in it, and slammed into the wall next to me. The quilt had pinned down the beast, giving me time to escape. Grandma had come through. She was in the negative spaces too. The rattling wall finally snapped me out of my daze. I turned and sprinted out the front of my door and ran as fast as I could down the street. The only thing I had on me was my phone. I'd left everything else behind. I ran until my lungs breathed fire. I ran until my house was a distant memory. I ran until my legs finally gave out and collapsed into some guy's flower bed. I climbed out of the flower bed and called Sam again. She said she just pulled up to my house, but saw the door open. She was worried something was wrong and was about to head in. I told her to stay in her car and come find me. She didn't argue. I quizzed her again as soon as she showed up, and once I felt confident it was her, I got into her car and broke down. I explained everything in between sobs, and no matter how insane it sounded, she didn't comment once. Just let me get it all out. When I was done, she hugged me and said, "I think it's safe to say you won the Worst Couple of Days award." I started laughing, "But you had to deal with Greg." "And you hate Greg?" "Yeah, I really do," she said, "but he's never tried to lure me to hell. I'll give him credit for that." We started laughing and did for a few minutes. After we were done, we grabbed something to eat to discuss what I should do next. As we were about to leave, I saw an unknown number come up on my phone. I usually don't answer, but I felt compelled to do so. "Hello," I said. There was nothing but static on the other end. "Hello," I said again. "Who's calling?" Between the static, I could hear the faintest whisper of a voice coming through. It was hard to hear with the other noise, but for a moment it cleared, and I heard a voice I thought I'd never hear again. "You're safe. Now who is this?" I said, my voice going gruff, trying to sound intimidating. "Who is it?" Sam asked. "Goodbye, little duck." The line went dead. I didn't move, save for the tears that instantly filled my eyes and rolled down my cheeks. Sam asked if I was okay, but I couldn't find my voice. I simply nodded and slumped back in my seat. I whispered in the tiniest voice possible, "Goodbye, Nana." Story 3. I used to sit in a dead girl's chair in fourth period history. Her name was Cassie. She was a grade above me, so I didn't really know her. I remember everyone at school being freaked out at her death. It's not common for people to die so suddenly around here, especially kids. Even now, as an adult, deaths like that aren't very frequent. Some depressed asshole decided he wanted to take some people with him, so he'd cut through the grass and sped down the opposite side of the highway. He plowed his pickup into Cassie's family van at 100 miles an hour, head on. Killed all 4 of them instantly. Wasn't even anything left to bury. Horrific shit. When I got older, my dad told me that he'd been driving home from work and passed by the crash. He said he'd never seen so much blood before. My dad owns a butcher shop, so that surprised me to say the least. Cassie's death still bothers me to this day. The way she went out just doesn't sit right with me. A whole human life, full of potential, snuffed out in an instant because a suicidal guy couldn't afford a pistol. How is that even remotely fair? There's murderers, rapists, abusers that walk free, living their garbage lives and not facing any consequences, while Cassie and her whole family had to die. Shit like that gets to me. I don't think I'll ever forget Cassie. Not because of who she was in life. Like I mentioned, I didn't even know the girl. But her death impacted all of us for a time. Longer than even I expected. I found out that she died during fourth period history class in my junior year of high school. I was sitting in the back corner, a spot I tended to prefer in most classes. Quiet, out of the way, and I could sneak looks out the window to daydream. I wasn't the most popular kid in high school, so I only kept company with a small group of friends. Unfortunately for me, none of them had history with me, so I usually stayed quiet. Mrs. Sanders came into class that day, looking a mess. Her makeup was smeared on her face, and she kept a bundle of tissues clenched in her left hand. She'd obviously been crying hard on the drive here. The whole class quieted down when she came in, fearful of what news she had that made her so broken up. She set her purse down on her desk, then made her way to the front of the class. "Class, I have an unfortunate announcement for you all," she said to us through sniffles. "Your upperclassmate, Cassie Engstrom, has passed away." The class had mixed reactions. A few started sobbing, either because they knew her or because they were just sad about a death so close to home. Most, including me, looked around at each other, not recognizing the girl's name. After Mrs. Sanders calmed down, class carried on as usual with lessons on the Civil War. I couldn't focus. For some reason, all I could think about was Cassie. How come barely anyone knew her? I could excuse myself for being an introvert, but it confused me that barely anyone could remember the girl. I couldn't even put a face to the name. A few days later, still clearly grieving, Mrs. Sanders told us a bit about Cassie. She was a quiet girl, she told us. Didn't talk a lot, which is why many of you may not have known her. But she was one of the brightest students I've ever had. She took this same class with me last year, just like you all. She sat right back there. She pointed right at my seat. It really shouldn't have bothered me. It was just a coincidence. She could have sat in any chair in that room, and it just so happened to be mine. But seeing everyone's head turned towards me made my spine crawl. I had an exam in third period the next day, so I was late to history. Mrs. Sanders was already lecturing when I walked in, so I rushed over to take my seat. When I sat, I felt a wet squish on the seat under me, like I had sat on a cake. I sighed, thinking it was a prank from some jock, but when I got up, there was nothing there. No mark on my pants or anything. I got up and touched the chair with my hand, and it felt normal. People were starting to look at me, so I quickly sat back down. The same thing happened again the next day, a wet squish when I sat for the first time. I even stayed after class to check under the seat for something, but it looked normal. It continued to happen, but I just started ignoring it. I assumed it was something to do with how old the seat was or my pants material or something, but I didn't give it much thought. On the drives to school, I would pass by the place where the accident happened. There wasn't much money going around in my town back then, so they hadn't done the best job cleaning up the spot. There were still large red patches on the asphalt, turned dark by the sun. I tried not to look whenever I passed. Sometime a few weeks later, I felt the wetness in a different spot this time. I was taking notes for our test that Friday, and I felt something slick and soft brush my hand. I immediately recoiled, dropping my pencil on the floor. My skin crawled from the touch, my nerves standing on their ends. The wetness wasn't even the worst part. I had gotten used to that from sitting in the chair. It was that it was cold. Like freezing cold. And again, just like the chair, there was nothing there. I had begun thinking that I was sick or something. like something was happening to my skin or organs that was causing these sensations. I got a checkup that weekend, and the tests came back clear. I was healthy. That next week was finals, so I stayed late at school to study. I was always more focused when I stayed at school to work on stuff. I would always get distracted if I studied at home, either from my own antics or those of my family. I picked my history room to study in, mostly because it had the largest windows. They would usually shut off the lights after hours, so I used the sunlight to read my textbooks. Naturally, I picked my usual seat. The wet squish was gone this time. I noticed immediately, now feeling uncomfortable, that the familiar sensation was gone. Odd how that happens. I had sat in the seat earlier in the day, so maybe the metal wasn't as stiff. I just shrugged to myself and got out my materials. I stayed for a few hours, getting as much studying done as I could before the janitors would eventually kick me out at 9. It was around 8:30 when I felt it again. That wet brush. I jumped even harder than last time, forcibly pulled out of my flow state. My heart was racing, and I glanced around the room to see if anyone was there. Nothing. I took a few moments to calm down, breathing hard and closing my eyes. When I opened them, I saw darkness. It took this scare to make me realize that I could barely see my notebook, and I had been squinting in the darkness for the past 30 minutes. The classroom was covered in shadow, with the posters of dead presidents' faces barely visible in the dark. Starting to get creeped out, I took this as my sign to finish up. When I reached to close my notebook, I felt it. A cold, wet slop of what could only be described as flesh draped on my shoulder. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. And God, I could smell it. I recognized the smell from my times helping my dad at his shop. It reeked of rot and decay, and I could feel streaks of putrid liquid falling down the side of my jacket. I was frozen. I couldn't move. I felt a deep chill form at the base of my spine and crawl to my nape. The previous touches had unnerved me and made me jump, but now I was truly terrified. I could feel its weight pressing on my shoulder, seeping liquid onto my skin underneath. The smell was unbearable. I looked over, and I could vaguely make out what was touching me. It was barely visible in the darkness, almost transparent under the shallow glow coming from the streetlight outside. It was a slab of dark red meat, thinner towards the tip. What seemed like bone stuck out from one end, and blood was dripping out of tiny holes on the surface of the flesh. I heard a deep guttural sound behind it, like someone gurgling water. It continued for a moment, and I could faintly make out words behind the noise.